Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Catherine Van Ness, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for K-12 Education here at the National Governors Association. Welcome to NGA's webinar on key takeaways from summer 2021. This webinar will highlight lessons learned during the summer last year regarding accelerating learning, re-engaging students, and effective use of federal funding. Our panelists will spotlight successful program models and offer recommendations of practices that schools can implement this year and as leaders begin planning for summer 2022. Please note this is the third in an ongoing Reflect and Redesign series of webinars that look at lessons learned during the pandemic and elevate state and local exemplars that can inform gubernatorial efforts during and beyond the pandemic. Please check out our earlier webinars on advancing equity through state education budgets and re-engaging students at the NGA website, and be on the lookout for forthcoming webinars on student and staff well-being and addressing the unique needs of students with disabilities, English learners, students experiencing homelessness, and students in tribal communities. Today, I am pleased to engage in a conversation with 5 national experts in summer learning and out-of-school time programs. Aaron Dworkin is CEO of the National Summer Learning Association, a national nonprofit organization focused on investing in summer learning to help close the achievement gap. Jody Grant is Executive Director of the Afterschool Alliance, a national nonprofit organization that works to expand after-school and summer opportunities wherever children live and learn. Tom Rosenberg is President and CEO of the American Camp Association, a national nonprofit that brings together over 12,000 camp professionals and accredits thousands of camps across the country. And from the U.S. Department of Education, we are joined by Danielle Smith, Director of Program and Grantee Support Services, and Melissa Moritz, the inaugural After School and Summer Learning Fellow at the department. I know we have a lot to get to, so I want to just jump right in with a national perspective. Danielle, what did you see this past summer that went well? Are there any innovations that you would like to highlight? Have you seen states and districts planning to use the unprecedented increase in federal funds to support quality summer and out of school time programs, innovating and trying new things to engage students? I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. And first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting the department to join this conversation today. We are very glad to be having a conversation about summer learning and also about lessons learned, because we think we have learned a lot over the years, but especially with the last summer. As you all know, we have had historic funds available to support the extension of high quality summer learning and enrichment and out of school time programming, both to support with COVID-19 recovery, but also to ensure that all young people have the supports that they need. A quick reminder of some of the different federal funds that are available. So in recovery funds, first, last year, the CARES Act was passed that created new recovery programs and appropriated funds through the ESSER and YEAR programs. Then the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021 came earlier this year, which appropriated additional funds for those programs, followed by the passage of the American Rescue Plan in March of 2021, which provides both a 1% set aside for summer learning and out of school time after school programming, or $1.2 billion nationally at the state level for summer learning and enrichment, and an additional $1.2 billion for comprehensive after school programming. So that's just at the state level funds supported by the American Rescue Plan. In addition, the funds that flow to local school districts, there's a 20% set aside at the district level for learning recovery broadly, which can also be used for expansion of out of school time programming. So we really are looking at a historic level of funding for out of school time and summer programming, with a specific ask to be thinking at the state level of how you're supporting those programs. In addition to these recovery programs, there are also other federal programs that regularly support summer learning. So we fund the 21st Century Community Learning Center program. We also fund other discretionary grant programs that contribute to out of school time opportunities, including Promise Neighborhoods, full service community schools, and other grant programs that support high quality out of school time. So there's a long history of federal support for this work, but really a pretty historic moment and opportunity to expand and think differently and innovatively about how we are using federal funds to support really high quality learning opportunities, and especially in how those opportunities are meeting the needs of students today. The passage of the American Rescue Plan in March was the impetus for the department to start the Summer Learning and Enrichment Collaborative. So back in the spring, when these funds were appropriated, we knew that states might need support, or at least just a place to really think about what is working and how they could leverage these dollars really creatively and strategically to support summer learning and enrichment opportunities for students. So starting in April of last year, we began convening state teams, which extended to after-school partners, program providers, local district program operators, school district staff, school level staff, foundations, and other community partners supporting the work, as well as intermediaries who help serve as go-betweens between school districts and programs to make the work happen. And we really started with some learning sessions to figure out what's working, where are there great examples around the country, how can we lift those up, and what are some of the evidence-based strategies that states and school districts could consider as they're using these new federal funds. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of those examples that we unearthed through our sessions over the summer. And we're also looking forward to continuing that effort. We recognize that summer 2021 was a particularly unique moment in time, and we really wanted to provide as much support as possible. But we're also recognizing that the funds coming in March, a lot of states didn't have an opportunity to think about what they wanted to do with those funds just then. So the work continues as we think about summer 2022 and out of school time opportunities this school year and in subsequent school years. I'm going to ask my colleague Melissa to share a couple of the examples that we saw of innovative approaches in the Summer Learning and Enrichment Collaborative. Melissa?
Thanks so much, Danielle, and thanks for setting the stage. In addition to highlighting the opportunities under ARP to expand high quality out of school time learning experiences, we really tried to highlight the importance of partnerships at the state, district, and local level with community-based organizations who have the expertise and community relationships to provide the engaging and safe learning environments for students who've been most impacted by COVID-19. Many of these organizations, we quickly learned, and many people across the country know, have the ability to scale high quality summer learning. And especially last summer, as states and districts were working so quickly to implement these funds, we found that when we were working with the Summer Learning and Enrichment Collaborative programs and working to highlight these examples, that these partnerships were efficient and sustainable ways to utilize these funds. And a few examples, and would love to turn it over to my colleagues who I'm sure have many more. We were particularly excited when we saw states collaborate with their existing 21st Century Community Learning Center infrastructure, because they were leveraging the in-house expertise at the state level around out of school time. For example, we saw in Vermont, they launched a Summer Matters initiative using relief funds to support sustainability. And they're going to be melding these newly expanded programs into the 21st century infrastructure and programming across the state. Vermont also launched a grant competition in partnership with Vermont Afterschool that enabled community-based organizations to apply directly for grant programming to expand operations in summer 2021. Which we thought was a really neat innovation. We also saw a number of states work with their statewide after-school network to both combine and administer the state set-asides in ARP. For example, in Georgia, the Georgia After-School Network and the Georgia State Department of Education partnered to administer the Building Opportunities in Out of School Time grant program, or BOOST grants. And the BOOST grants are prioritizing funding for students who were disproportionately impacted by COVID in Georgia, including youth with disabilities, youth experiencing homelessness, youth in foster care, youth receiving free or reduced price lunch, migratory youth, K-5 students, and students who received remote learning for the majority of the 2021 school year. They recently announced $27 million in funding under this new program, reaching students all across the state. And lastly, in Arizona, we saw the governor utilize GEAR funds to support the direct expansion of the Boys and Girls Club summer programming and provide scholarships for families so that 4,000 children could attend full-day programming that included meals, gym time, outdoor play, art, and music all summer long. So those were just some of the many, many examples we saw surfaced. And I'm sure there are many, many more that we're excited to learn more about and continue to highlight.
Thank you so much, Danielle and Melissa, for setting the stage there, and for reminding everyone of the many funding streams that are at their fingertips now, as states are coordinating how to spend all of that funding. It is so important, as you pointed out, to look at those partnerships and some of those statewide networks that exist and have relationships that have really been strengthened through the trials of the pandemic. So I will turn to some of our other panelists now. Jody, did you want to jump in and highlight some other innovations or strong programs from this past summer?
So I did, and it really is exciting, some of the state models of what's coming out. And, Melissa highlighted some of the terrific examples, and a reminder that there are 50 state after-school networks who really know the programs on the ground that have been instrumental in places like Georgia or Minnesota in identifying where kids need resources and they may not be touched. And I wanted to say that I think the most exciting resource for me is the recognition this summer and into the school year that kids are learning all the time. They're not just learning when they're in a classroom with the teacher. And we have throughout the pandemic been polling parents, and the Wallace Foundation also just did a poll of parents called Learning Heroes. And what parents say, and you'll hear this from educators too, is it's not just the academic piece. It's the piece about social, emotional, collaborating with other kids, being with caring adults, being with mentors. Our kids have been isolated, many of them for a year and a half, working with community-based organizations, with camps, with other partners to have a holistic approach to our kids' recovery is essential. And that's what excites me most. Places where state education agencies have contracted either through state networks or 21st century programs directly with community-based organizations. There's a lot of money going to local education agencies. We know that they're going to be more successful if they partner with community-based organizations. At the state level, you have the opportunity to do that directly with partners like Boys and Girls Clubs, 4-H, that have that ability to scale up and potentially reach kids that may not be reached by their LEA dollars. So I think that is really, really essential. I also think we have seen the creation of what I call community learning ecosystems, really thinking into tapping into the best of the community. And this was particularly while schools were closed, to create a place for kids to learn. And that is a combination of businesses, parks and recs, camps again were terrific collaborator, every space imaginable, museums, science centers, historic centers, where we could bring kids where they could be learning in person and then also have support for virtual learning. And I truly hope that we can use this opportunity to take the best of the pandemic learning and continue to expand it. And to me, the best of that is this holistic approach, thinking about all of the valuable adults and educators that work with our kids and how to maximize the specific skills they bring to the table when we're looking into empowering and engaging our children and youth.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder. We'll make sure to include a link to those 50 state after school networks so that folks know who to reach out to if they don't already have a contact there. Erin, did you want to highlight any program innovations or point out some differences of how summer learning and enrichment may have changed during this pandemic time, and what you may want to bring forward from that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Catherine. And I just want to give a little thank you to all the governors or their teams and their staff for their leadership and their investment and continuous work on these issues to help the young people in their states. So we are all here to help them and support them. But what I would just say is everything that Jody said, and I have to say thank you to our colleagues from the U.S. Department of Education for leading and making just historic levels of investment in a moment of crisis that had some silver linings. So I think one thing that we see is that we have, like Jody just outlined, millions of partners, literally millions of partners, adults, caring adults and programs and schools and other institutions in our communities and our states that have not always been as well coordinated as they need to be. And in a moment of crisis, leaders at the local level, state level, certainly at the federal level, we were well convened, but a lot of this work has to happen at the local level and the state level. So, we have so many library systems and government youth serving agencies at the governor's, in your members' disposal to bring together and convene and support that want to get involved. And sometimes while we have all these investments and we have a lot of great best practices of things that work, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that we saw more coordination and more communication than ever before. People broke out of their silos and said, all right, I'm a library, you need reading help. I'm a summer camp, I have a facility, I'm a museum, I'm a parks department, I have vans. How do we all try and serve the same children in this community, and with a focus on the most vulnerable students? So through that crisis came a lot of creativity, came a lot of hyper collaboration, and there's just a lot of great programmatic examples that we hope will continue on through the year. It happened during the summer, it's now happening in the after school settings and can continue on into the school year. And the investments in community schools have been emphasizing this for a long time. I just think, at the national level and the state level, we have a broader perspective. We're not working with students day in, day out in our offices. So we can see everyone that's doing different things. But if you're running program, you may not know about the great resource across the street or across town or across your state. And so with this extra money, normally we're attuned and all primed to kind of do more with less. The challenge we have now is how do we do more with more? Because we have more funding than ever before, and we are not allowed to stay the same. We can't just serve the same number of students that we did pre-pandemic. First of all, there's higher need and there's more demand, but also we have more resources. So the onus is upon all the adults, all these leaders, all these programs to get together and figure out what do you do best? And what does someone do better than you? And come with some humility and come with some open-heartedness about everything students need in this holistic approach that Jody just mentioned. Not every single institution, organization can provide by themselves. And so if you're academic institution, you're great at providing math and reading, that's great, but they also need social emotional learning, and they also need health and fitness and exposure to nature and mentors and job skills. And everybody in our community has a strength. And so again, I just think the governors have a huge role in kind of braiding all these resources and all these skill sets and that we have in our states and our communities, and being more creative about it. So there are a lot of examples of how people did that. I don't want to go on now, but I just want to say that that's the opportunity we have. We have the funding to do it. We have a lot of research that shows what works. And that's one of the reasons we were able in our field, the out of school time field especially, has a track record of decades of research and proven practices and investments. And so in a crisis, when we had to figure out how do we get money to kids and the resources and the services they need, we had an infrastructure in place from Tom's organizations, Jody, the Department of Ed's investments, Wallace Foundation, Mott Foundation, all these groups have been laying the groundwork, and people were able to quickly respond and kind of pivot. And I think some of those relationships that were kind of new can carry over.
Absolutely. And, governors certainly play that convening role. But as you said, it's great at the state level to break down some of those silos, but also so necessary at the local level. So, really just encourage folks to turn to that community. And Tom, I'll turn to you to share some of your opening thoughts here and some great programs that you saw this past summer.
Sure. So thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Aaron, for what you just said. The governors have the ability to really help us move these partnerships forward, building on all the strengths that we have currently. What I'd just like to highlight really quickly is that how well summer learning programs, camps, after school programs, all kinds of summer learning programs demonstrated that they could operate successfully in COVID using research-informed, multi-layered mitigation strategies. That was big. Before school even went back in 2020, this was happening. And we were able to keep some of those learning hubs continue to operate all year long. These are summer camp counselors converted to educators, working with certified teachers to provide really, really excellent programs. And we taught kids how to work together, right, immersively in these wonderful learning communities, reconnecting them with each other socially and emotionally, giving them opportunities to learn new skills, take positive risks, make mistakes, and build emotional resilience in the children who were fortunate enough to have those programs in summer of 2020 or summer of 2021, had a leg up on the other children who did not. And so we need to equitably provide all of this for all of our kids each and every summer going forward. I would say in terms of examples, Catherine, I get really excited. One program in particular I'd love to highlight right now is really all about the power of immersive learning in nature beyond the walls of traditional classrooms over at the Hale Outdoor Learning Adventures, which has been partnering now for a while with Boston Public Schools and Boston Afterschool and beyond. This is where public schools are partnering with program providers where kids go have over 1,000 acres of adventure, in the outdoors, where certified teachers and school counselors double as mentors who inspire curiosity and spark learning and build community in these official summer learning academies that are operated by Boston Public Schools. This has been studied by RAND Corporation, who's with us, with NIOS. And this is both filling, learning gaps, in enriching ways, but also helping to fill nature gaps. I think the most exciting thing about the silver lining of so much tragedy right now is that there are, as you've all said, Aaron, most recently, that there's thousands of willing camps in rural America and in the urban cities, who are potential providers for these kinds of programs for public schools, both in summer learning and also for expanded learning during the school year, all of it. And all we have to do is get together, and we can talk more about that.
A great program to highlight. And as everyone has already been saying today, learning happens inside the school, but also outside of the school building. And that's a great example of getting kids into the safety of the outdoors during this time, and learning can happen there. So Aaron, I'll turn to you for a moment to talk more about that research that points to some of the key components of strong summer programs, and ask you to really just illustrate what summer learning looks like across the country. Some folks have personal experiences that they may picture when they hear the term, but it'll be helpful to kind of set that stage for our listeners today.
Sure. Well, again, so thank you, Tom and Jody and everyone for your examples. I'll just share that summer learning is a term that evolved out of a response to the more negative, and historically, not so positive definition of summer school or perception of summer school. So if you go back, 100 years, if you historically, broadly, if a student was assigned to summer school, that was typically considered a punishment. It was mandatory, it was remedial, you were making up for what you missed. Nobody wanted to go. It wasn't particularly engaging. They didn't have a say in what they were gonna be learning that summer. And people did not really want to go. So summer learning was a response that said, hey, we could do more with the summer, and we need to make it much more positive. And we need to help school districts and other partners think about how to reimagine the summer, not for just students who are struggling, but also for all students who just need more opportunity and time and a chance to explore new things. So not just what you may have missed and need to make up, but what about other topics that you don't get to, whether it's robotics or coding or some other kind of career exploration. And so summer learning was, the term was defined to be an opposite to summer school, but also to express all the fun and joy that should be available to all young people, not just families that could afford it. Because we know middle and upper middle class families gladly and happily and quickly, without blinking or thinking, will spend thousands upon thousands of dollars for amazing enrichment and educational opportunities for the young people in their lives over the summer. The question is, for all the millions of families and students who cannot afford those opportunities, what can we do for them? And what the research had shown and has been showing for decades is that is when this gap gets created. The most unequal time in education, in our opinion, but there's a lot of research around this, is over those summer months. So, and that was referred to as summer learning loss, and you could document, you know, and it's a cumulative effect. And that came out of Carl Alexander's research over at Johns Hopkins, you know, decades ago, but it still is just quite persistent that, you know, those who had those educational opportunities continued to learn. They were ready and prepared more in September when they got back to school. And then the students who didn't have those chances fell further behind and those gaps grew. So summer learning, people were very focused on how can we help school districts. We've always worked with school districts, but now we work with lots of partners. We have a group called New Vision for Summer School, and we talk about the principles of how to make a high quality summer program. And again, Jennifer McCombs from RAND was highlighted. She put out research that looked at all these different program models and found 43 program models. And so maybe, Catherine, we could put the link to her report from RAND that said these are different program designs that meet the top tier of high quality learning according to the U.S. Department of Education. So I just would also emphasize that there's been a lot of research as we move from summer learning loss focus, and we like to talk about it in a more positive strength-based approach. So now we talk about unfinished learning because it morphed into, for some, from summer learning loss to COVID learning loss. And I think it's really worth emphasizing, and both our friends at the NWEA, Northwest Education Association, Wallace Foundation, McKinsey and Company, we're even putting out reports in real time. This is what's happening with students who are home. Students, again, just like we see over the summer months. If you were a family with resources, who had laptops, who had parents who could figure out how to do pods and get other people to help your student, you struggled, but you had other ways to keep learning. And for those who didn't have those, you had a lot of the folks who are on this call and their networks stepping in, saying, all right, what resources can we bring? And that's who, you know, the most vulnerable students with the least, that's who we're trying to focus on the most. So there's a lot of research. Again, we can put those links. I also want to highlight that there's a lot of research prior to COVID to build on. And the National Academies of Sciences put out an amazing report called Shaping Summertime Experiences, where they had a whole commission for 2 years, look at all the best practices and research and opportunities around how to leverage and invest further in summer. And they came out with this report right before COVID. And a lot of the lessons and the recommendations, which include, you know, investing in state policies and increasing funding and coordination of and investment in intermediaries and all these sharing of best practices, you know, things that we need to do. They were important before COVID. They're even more important now. And then I don't need to share more of what people know about the research around just who was most disproportionately affected by the effects of COVID. And who we know that low-income families and students and especially communities of color were most hard hit in terms of getting infected with COVID, the deaths that occurred, unemployment. So again, it's education, but it's obviously always more. And so with a real laser beam focus on how do we serve the most vulnerable students, you know, we again can go back to some of our best practices. And so we know we want to target the populations who need the services the most, that there needs to be an investment in systems level support and statewide level and all these community-wide partnerships to focus on using these programs as a way to increase staff retention, staff recruitment, and staff training. So to also think a little bit more broadly. And then again, think about summer and after school programs, not just when they're happening, but as part of their year-round planning. And states that do this and school districts that do this, they get ahead of the curve. A lot of this money showed up in March. The ones who were able to take the money and run and do great with the families were the ones who had this built into their plan already. But if you were just starting in April to think about what you're going to do in June, it was a struggle. So now we sit here in November, we have time to plan. But again, this should not just be a crisis emergency situation. This should be something that's built into our year-round investment planning and strategy. Again, governors can help with that.
Absolutely. Take those relationships, build them now and keep them warm moving forward for goodness forbid the next time we're faced with a hardship like this. But I will definitely include those links to those reports because there are, you know, lessons learned from the pandemic times, but certainly lessons that were true before the pandemic, unfortunately, will probably continue to be true until they're addressed moving forward. Jody, I'll let you jump in here before we move on.
I just wanted to flag because I think everything Erin said is so important, and it is, just mounds and mounds of research exists about the power of summer learning and after school. But even prior to the pandemic, we were not reaching enough kids. So the After School Alliance went into the field, and for every child that was in a summer learning program or summer camp program, the parents of at least one more child wanted these programs for their kids, but they didn't have access. And for after school, it's 3 for everyone. So we have 25 million children whose parents want them to be in after school programs, but prior to the pandemic, didn't have that access. And I would say many of the programs are serving fewer kids because of the safety protocols that they have to have in place for COVID. So this is something where we absolutely can build back a lot better and stronger by reaching more kids. And I wanted to flag how deep that need is and how popular this is with parents from every area of the country. They want this.
Absolutely. And Tom, did you want to jump in as well?
I would just say really quickly that I think it's important to know that in this time, after kids have been isolated for 18 months plus, we're starting to see the effects of that severe isolation, and the social and emotional, helping young people reconnect with their peers and learn and practice social and emotional learning competencies is an essential precursor to academic learning gains. So we've got to do this work right now, and really for summer learning will forever be has always been important, an important part of a child's year-long learning landscape. But now it's essential that summer be an opportunity for young people to catch up during the school year, but also during summer on social and emotional learning competencies. There's lots of research point to that. All that good time at camp and STEM programs or recreational programs is a really critical part of important precursor to outstanding academic success.
Absolutely. And, the research shows that. And as Jody mentioned previously, the parent surveys showed that parents are also concerned about that for their children. And so Danielle and Melissa, I would love to hear from you in terms of, we know that this is so important for youth to have this support, especially coming out of this difficult years now, multiple school years that have been disrupted. And facing, any personal hardship as well. What does the evidence show in terms of benefits to students' social, emotional, and academic development from these summer learning and out of school time programs? And again, are there particular models that you've seen, from your national perch that you would like to highlight?
Such a great question. And I agree so much with what Tom, Erin, and Jody shared. One of the things that I love about out of school time is that no matter what outcome you are trying to drive towards, there is a program model that has been studied that can do that. So if you are trying to rebuild trust and connection with adults, there's a program for you. If you are trying to advance STEM learning, there's a program for you. If you are trying to make sure that kids have the opportunity to recover from lost math instructional time, there's a program for you. If you're trying to build really inclusive environments, there's a program for you. And the evidence consistently shows that when summer and after school programs are well designed and well implemented, they increase students' social, emotional, and academic learning and development. And as Jody mentioned, out of school time programs receive high marks from parents and students consistently. So it's like evidence, check. Kids love it, check. Parents love it, check. So as Erin said, the onus is on all of us to make sure we're doing more and better. And just to really emphasize the opportunity to design evidence-based summer learning and after-school programs to align to the outcomes that matter most in local communities, I think is really an opportunity that we all have right now. So there are, of course, some general evidence-based practices for out-of-school time that I will quickly bullet through and then attach a whole bunch of links for you to make sure you have them, some really great evidence overviews narratives and briefs. But I really want to emphasize that it's important to use that local context, the local needs assessments you've all been doing, the data you've been collecting to determine what is needed right now, and make sure that the decisions and designs are different depending on what kids, families, and communities in your state need right now. And we do have an important opportunity with the additional resources to continue to build the evidence base. So whatever you're trying, even if it's totally new and out of the box, learn from it, set up those data collection processes, set up those great continuous improvement loops, partner with evaluation groups and researchers to make sure we're continuing to learn from this time, because I'm confident there are new models out there and that we can continue to build the evidence base to continue to make the case that out of school time is a critical component of kids' development and a critical component of thriving communities. And so in particular for, in terms of evidence-based core components, a few things I would just, be remiss if I didn't highlight, given that I sit in IES, want to make sure to really emphasize that attendance matters. And lots of things can lead to increased attendance, whether that's a positive and welcoming site climate, whether that's parent and family engagement, whether that's building strong relationships with students or communicating regularly the benefits of attending regularly. You can provide lots of opportunities that directly align to student interests. You can co-design programs with students, all of those things, but ultimately attendance really matters. So make sure you're planning now for how you're going to increase attendance, track attendance, and make sure kids are coming back. Duration also matters. So programs that are at least 5 weeks long and include 3 hours a day of academic instruction have been most strongly linked with lasting impacts on students' academic achievement. Curriculum should be high quality and aligned with school year standards. It's also ideal to have effective educators with content knowledge and grade level expertise for the academic component of the day. But my last kind of principle is also that program design really matters. And programs should have a combination of academics and enrichment. There should be small class sizes. And it's just an opportunity to make sure that we're explicitly partnering out of school time programs and schools and districts to reinforce the learning that happens in school, and that these learning and enrichment experiences are mutually reinforcing. So again, I've come back to this notion that partnership really matters. And so for after school programs, the evidence-based practices are pretty similar. And I'll provide a link to the IES out of school time practice guide, but there's 5 recommendations if you're particularly trying to increase academic achievement. So make sure you have the link to that, but it's generally to align the out of school program with the school day. Again, maximize participation and attendance, adapt the instruction to individual and small group needs, provide engaging learning experiences, and assess program performance regularly and use those assessments to improve the quality of the program. So we'll make sure you have all of those links and resources. I know I just listed a whole bunch of evidence-based practices, but really to make those come alive, I'd love to turn it over to Danielle to talk through some examples of how we saw those evidence-based practices play out this summer.
Thanks, Melissa, and thank you for walking us through some of the evidence around summer programs. I mentioned previously that the department convened over the summer Learning and Enrichment Collaborative, which brought together state leaders, local leaders, and other partners that support the community learning ecosystems that Jody talked about to really make summer programs happen. And one of the goals that we had with that collaborative was to provide a space where people could learn from each other and could see really creative, innovative, and successful examples of summer programs across the country. In doing that, we were looking for programs that addressed a number of different needs that we were hearing needed to be addressed. So one of those was focusing on how do we support the whole child, including their social, emotional, and mental health needs, particularly as so many students were experiencing trauma related to the pandemic. And so we really looked for some examples where programs were creatively addressing those needs and wanted to just highlight a few today. I will also let you know that we did take videos of all of these sessions over the summer. So if you're interested in learning more about any of these programs, we have all of the videos available on our website, including additional information, links to their sites, and takeaways from the conversations that we hosted over the summer. One example is the Anytown program in Tampa. It's a 5-day, 4-night residential experience, followed by then a year of leadership and service opportunities for students. Any town brings together 50 to 60 youth annually who look differently, live differently, and love differently. And the program empowers these youth to create more inclusive and just schools and communities for themselves. So part of the mission of the program is really creating that safe, inclusive space for students and providing them with the skills, vocabulary, and leadership opportunities to create their own safe spaces. Another program that we highlighted in the Summer Learning Enrichment Collaborative was the Malibu Boys and Girls Club, who engaged kids in developing their own vocabulary and skills to communicate about their own emotions, recognizing those things as normal events that people go through when they experience trauma. Often our students don't have a vocabulary to talk about their feelings, to understand what it is they're experiencing, to name it, and then feel like they have control and agency over how to deal with them. So the Malibu Boys and Girls Club program really gave those students agency, helped them build the vocabulary to process their experiences of COVID-19, and also build their resiliency moving forward. And we'll note also that the program delivered these services virtually. So although many programs were in person, and that was a super helpful support for students who may have been disconnected from their friends and teachers over the school year, this program was still delivered virtually and saw some really great results and included some video from some of their sessions to just show how it really created a space for students to kind of open up and think and reflect and engage. So we thought those were two helpful ones to highlight. There are so many others. And as Melissa mentioned, if you're trying to do something around social emotional learning and mental health supports, there's a program for that. There are so many models, as well as those that have been integrated into classrooms for decades, many with support from the federal government, that we have highlighted. And so I will also mention, and we'll include this link as well as another resource, that the department has recently released a resource on supporting child, student emotional, behavioral, emotional, and mental health needs. This is not just a need that students have during the summer months. It is something that we need to integrate into education year round. And that is something that the department is focused on very explicitly this year. If you've engaged at all with our return to school roadmap, we have 3 pillars, and including the health and safety of students, social, emotional, behavioral support, and the academic component of learning. All of these things comprise creating safe, welcoming, and effective learning and enrichment environments for students. So we encourage you to check out some of the resources that the department has. But I think that this is a really important piece when we're talking about what we've learned from summer learning, is that it doesn't make sense to try to bifurcate academic engagement and the rest of the student experience. That, you know, students experience learning in a holistic way, and programs that incorporate all of these things are the ones that are most effectively serving our students.
Absolutely. And again, we'll include all of those resources, but students are whole people who experience the world all at the same time as it comes at them. So it's important to meet all of those needs, as you said, during the traditional school year and outside of the time that they're in that school building.
And Catherine, I'll just follow up to say, you know, we've talked about partnerships quite a bit, but this is really an area where schools can rely on other partners who have a lot of experience in providing these kinds of supports to students to help close their own capacity gaps or build their own capacity in how they're serving students. So I think some of the really exciting and effective models that we saw were where school systems were partnering directly with community-based organizations and other youth serving agencies that know how to provide that support and have the expertise to really think about how they were dealing with the needs of the whole child.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I'll turn to you quickly just to address how you saw programs engaging with not only students, but their families and the communities. We know that that is so important to, as Melissa said, you know, participation and attendance is a key marker of quality. How did you see programs reaching out to students and their families?
Yeah, I think I just want to quickly say, as a follow-up to what Danielle just mentioned, that you know, camps and other summer learning programs have been well established over decades of research as wonderful places to learn and practice social and emotional learning competencies. It's essentially what we do best. And so I think, to your point, Danielle, we're so eager to provide places, spaces, and expertise in partnership with classroom educators. We can't get started fast enough. Families were eager to make sure camp was emotionally and physically safe, COVID savvy, and kids were looking for some independence from their parents to try new things and to feel, once they felt emotionally and physically safe, they were looking for opportunities to try new things, take positive risks, even make mistakes and learn how to make mistakes, build resilience. And so I think parents were looking for strong collaborations, right? Where they saw school educators working with established outdoor programs. Another example I have is the Guided Discoveries, and operates in California and Virginia. It's a nonprofit. They have a program called Astro Camp in both Virginia and in California, where they are kids are learning science, technology, engineering, astronomy. It's like an enriching, experiential, hands-on extension and reinforcement of all the learning that's initiated in the classroom. And teachers love it. It's out in nature. And so here we have an opportunity where the ESSER funding can make that available to many more kids. So many of these programs were not able to operate during COVID. Thankfully, with a lot of work between governors, the American Camp Association, a lot of the agencies on screen right now, we were able to document the way to operate COVID safe and be able to serve kids. So right now, there's an explosion of activity around these kinds of partnerships, both during the summer months and during the school year, between camps and other learning programs, after school and so forth. So I think parents are looking for signs of that kind of expertise, because they're looking for quality camp operators or quality after school operators, and they're looking for certified teachers and curriculum that's been approved by their state board of education.
Absolutely. And Jody, I know you've also seen where some of these programs can help to fill in gaps for districts. Speaking of these capacity concerns, it's important to turn to external partners who have the expertise, but sometimes districts are finding capacity challenges with staffing shortfalls that we're hearing so much about across the country. I'm sure that's hitting your programs and your networks as well. Can you share any lessons learned or things you're seeing across the country?
I can, and we'll share a tool too on recruitment and retention. I just wanted to flag two things first, which is an important partner as we think about all this that hasn't been mentioned, is many of our faith-based partners, both as sites and staff for our kids. And one of the best things about after school is every community has resources to tap into, no matter how small. And as governors, you of course know your state and your localities best for tapping into those resources. And another, when we're talking about blending and braiding, is food, because many of our kids are hungry. And in summer learning programs and in after school programs, we have a chance to feed them. And that is when we're thinking about whole child, like it's a lot easier to learn when you're actually not hungry. So I think that that's essential. One of the things we are facing, like everyone else, is a staffing crisis. If you work for McDonald's and you need to pay your staff more, you raise the price of a burger and fries. You can't always do that in after school because parents are hard pressed, and particularly if you're relying on public funding, the American Rescue Plan dollars can help with that. So one thing is absolutely looking at the wages we pay our staff, but one of the great opportunities in after school is the ability to employ youth and young adults. So looking to high school students that we can train to work with younger students, that near peer mentorship, looking to college students, looking to programs like AmeriCorps, where you can work part-time while you have another job, or part-time while you're in college. We've seen that happen, or full-time in the after-school space. So one of the things we're trying to look into is how can we be really, really creative. I would love to see a Teach for America type program. And I know that, I have to give Melissa some credit for this too, where we're really training, several hundred youth workers to go into the after school summer learning space as part of AmeriCorps, and really blending and braiding all the streams that are out there. I think it's also really, really essential to collaborate and communicate. And I want to, give a shout out to Danielle, Melissa, Erin, and Tom, because it's probably very obvious to all of you how much we've been collaborating, and the way the Department of Ed has really taken the lead in bringing together a variety of partners and stakeholders to put kids front and center and figure out what they need to learn is something that can be absolutely replicated at the state level. And I think that as governors, really using that ability to convene and to make it clear that these partnerships help our students, our parents, and our communities is something that you have a unique ability to make happen. And if it does happen, we will all be stronger for it.
Absolutely. Well said. And Erin, I'll turn to you to see, what are some of the challenges you saw with summer programs? And do you have any recommendations, or are you seeing programs looking ahead to anticipate and maybe mitigate some of those challenges for next summer?
Sure. And again, echoing everything Jody just said, I just think one nice thing about summer, if we're honest about it, is it doubles up as two things. One, it's a transition point. And so by virtue of being this transition, it's a life transition. If you're in middle school, it's the summer between middle school and high school, the summer between elementary school and middle school. Or the summer between high school and college. These are critical times in people's lives that if you can make a great investment, you could set them up for success into their next stage of life. So that another high ROI reason to invest in this time. But I would also just emphasize again, I think we know right now it's November. We have challenges that we saw that we know will be waiting for us, but we have some time to plan and get ahead of it. So transportation issues. If you want to take kids out of their school settings and put them somewhere else, that's fine. But there was there's a bus driver shortage, we know, in some places, right? Or many places. But there are folks that are willing to drive that have the van. So there's a lot of connecting the dots that still needs to happen. The staffing issue you've talked about. If I was a governor and I had access to state universities and state colleges, and there's a lot you could do in terms of giving credit to students to working in these programs, or tuition, exemptions and things like this to kind of motivate folks and make it part of their course curriculum. So there's a lot there. Thinking about issues of space, again, for COVID safety, we wanted folks to be more distant, and it was better to be outside. Again, if you're a governor and you have state parks, you have access to space and outdoor spaces, and you can be creative. And there was a program a lot of us have discussed called Teachers in the Parks in Pennsylvania that brought certified teachers into parks, and they were sitting under trees and working on reading and math. So there's a lot of different ways to bring learning to other settings, but we know that's a challenge. I think data sharing. We have lots of different folks collecting data, often on the same students, but it's not being aggregated well enough and put into one place. And so the Boys and Girls Club has a lot of data on what's going on over the summer with students. School districts have it, libraries have it. And are they the same students? Are they not? Who's being served? I think there's also, we saw this at the last summer when so much effort went into setting up programs, and then there was a communications challenge. Do parents and families know that these programs exist? We've done all this work to staff it and set it up, and now who's recruiting them? And we teamed up with the U.S. Department of Education and Secretary Cardona to do a whole Discover Summer website and media campaign. But it was at the last moment, and I think we could get ahead of that around recruitment. There are a lot of adults in buildings and a lot of nonprofit and government agency partners who could be tasked with talking to students and families soon in the next few months. What is your summer plan? Where are you going to be? Tell us where you're going to be. And when they come back in the fall, where were you? What did you do? What did you learn? And we got to collect the dots around this information. But ultimately, I'll just say, as everyone's been saying, we have to move, and people are doing this. We're moving from a rigid, everyone thinks their program design and model was the best, but in this moment and going forward, we have to have some more flexibility and a reimagining. And you may have always done sports in your program or art in your program. We need you to do some math and reading in your program, and maybe hire some certified teachers to work in the program if you can. And conversely, if you've always done academics, we need you to get some health and fitness and social emotional learning curriculum into your program. So everybody's got to stretch themselves. And if they're not comfortable doing those things, make a phone call and reach out to the people, and everyone on this call can help. I think we also have to move our folks from feeling a competitive mindset to a really cooperative and communal mindset. People are doing it, but so often people are focused on themselves, and we have a scarcity mindset that says there's only a few dollars and I need it for myself and my program and my students. And if we take a kind of a broader approach, which governors would have, you could kind of do more with more. And finally, there's an urgency here. As adults, we could look at 5-year plans and 10-year plans, but 2 years, 1 year, these time frames are much shorter for students' lives and the impact we could have. And so kind of really communicating that urgency, as the phrase fierce urgency of now. I mean, it's real. And so everything you're doing right now to prepare for next summer, all of us on this call are ready to help you, and it's really important, and we'll do whatever you need.
Wonderful. And as we near the end of our time today, with this series being called Reflect and Redesign, I'll ask each of you quickly to reflect, share one lesson from summer 2021 that you want folks to carry forward, or as you see the current opportunity to redesign some learning opportunities for students, what excites you? What are you hoping to see happen this year and next summer? I'll turn to our folks from the department first. Danielle, Melissa.
Thanks, Catherine. I think one thing that really has excited me is seeing how certain communities were able to leverage existing programs, some of which the department has supported with funding on an ongoing basis. So we mentioned earlier the 21st Century Community Learning Center program, but we also saw a lot of examples where programs were leveraging full service community schools that have been able to support families throughout the year and keep them engaged, as well as communities that were leveraging their Promise Neighborhoods programs to provide really excellent summer learning opportunities and enrichment opportunities for students. And so when you think about sustainability and you think about what can we do with these one-time funds that could be sustained over time, we would encourage states to look at some of their sustained investments and how can you use these one-time funds to help build systems, build infrastructure, expand the ecosystems that are supporting students in communities in your state to then really provide the infrastructure that will be able to be sustained through some of these other existing programs going forward. So that was an exciting thing to see where that leverage was happening in communities and states across the country. And I'm excited to see more how we can encourage that continued conversation in states where those opportunities can be leveraged going forward.
And I'll keep it brief. My big, takeaway from this last summer and also moving forward is that partnership is key, just so key, and that no one can do this alone or should have to. One of the privileges of this last summer was learning about the people, initiatives, organizations, offices, programs who all have supports, whether that's technical assistance, whether that's research briefs, whether it's evaluation capacity. There's a lot of different tools. So don't go it alone. If you need help navigating any of those structures, all of the people on this phone call and many more would be very excited to support you in your state. And the partnerships are key. And if you get started now, they take a long time sometimes to start from if you don't have them already in place.
Ready?
So to be a broken record, partnership. I think that the creativity and the collaboration in local communities across our nation has been extraordinary. And where that collaboration has happened, our kids have been much better off. And I think that, thanks to, examples that the department has on tape, and all sorts of other examples. There are ways, no matter what your community looks like, there are examples to replicate how to take the best resources in your community and pull it together for a learning ecosystem for our kids. And I truly think that this is our chance to take learning and education to a whole new level, to engage a host of partners doing really exciting things to holistically give our kids skills to be our workforce of the future. So I really hope that we forge ahead and, as Danielle said, really build that infrastructure based in our states and our communities so that it will be solid when this funding is gone, and we will be able to continue to build off of it.
And Aaron?
I'll just, again, I'll add, governors and states have broad agendas. They care about lots of issues, from safety to health and mental health and physical health and the unemployment and employment and the economy and building community. And all those agenda issues and items that you have can be met and served by investing in the after school and summer space, because we are a kind of a sweet spot in the Venn diagram where all those topics and goals come together, and we can be a real service to you and to your broader agenda in all those different ways. So if you view us that way, you could get a lot of your goals accomplished by working with our field.
And Tom, I'll give the last word to you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Catherine. We're eager to collaborate, as everyone has said, but I want to just go back really quickly to the staffing challenges that everyone is experiencing. And I want to highlight that summer learning programs have educationally appropriate and developmentally appropriate programs for emerging adults who are learning to be leaders. That will help us all support our programs, but these are human development educational programs where kids are learning to take positive risks while they teach, while they learn leadership lessons. They're learning to take positive risks in a young adult way as a near peer to the children they serve, as a helper. There's a lot of summer employment opportunities that are provide excellent education and developmental opportunities for them. So in a pre-COVID summer, I think at summer camp, we would serve 1.2 million young adults in those kinds of roles. We need many more to be able to fulfill the need that we're defining here in this talk today. So encourage parents, teachers to encourage young adults to take upon these summer employment opportunities, because they are critical to help them strengthen their emotional resilience, help them have aspirations for their future, hopefully as a teacher, and it'll build confidence and self-esteem. So I think I just want to highlight that a real opportunity right now in this pandemic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for this robust discussion and sharing your insights today and recommendations for governors' offices. Thank you to those who have tuned in, and please note that, as we've been saying, all of these reports and resources discussed today will accompany the recording on NGA's website. Until next time, thank you for listening. We hope you and your families stay safe and well, and have a great day.